Okay. I think they're interesting questions, and I think, and they're provocative questions because I think they embedded in them are like a series of assumptions, right? And so, like the question of King, of like, how do we still see King's impact today, right? Like, and so I was saying the other day, I went to so I'm in Louisville, Kentucky, and so I went to the Ali Center, and the family that helps to curate and maintain and fund that, I was talking to the son, and he was saying to me, he's like, I love what we're doing here. Um, he said, because Muhammad Ali clearly still has an impact in this world, right? Particularly within the Black community, um, given what he did and has continued to do. He said, but it's funny because we think about like how the impact that he's currently having is very different than the impact that he initially had, right? Which then made me think about your question and just kind of the whole conversation around King and what impact is he having. And I'm like, okay, well, that has a lot to do with how we remember him, right? Like there's like obvious impacts, like, okay, well, he helped to get, um, the Civil Rights Act of 64, 65. He helped to get the bill passed. He helped to do that, right? And he didn't do that by himself, but he was part of that. He's attributed to that, right? But it's like he doesn't get that bill passed without the race riots, right? The Watts riots, rather, right? And JFK looking at the Watts riots and go, okay, either we do this King's way or we have to deal like Malcolm's way, right? And he was actually quoted as saying this. He's like, so King becomes successful at getting bills and policies passed, not because he's necessarily docile and preaching love and Nagarjuna is like and Gandhi's notions of like peace, but he's primarily effective. His approach is effective because there's someone else who represents the threat of violence. And so now, we as a country are forced to choose. Do we want to deal with the person who's asking us to do this peacefully, or do we want to reckon with the one who's willing to engage in the same violence that relegated them to that space in the first place, right? To use the same violence against people who've used violence against them. And so I think that's it. So you think about King's impact. So you have that, right? But then you also have like how we remember King. And that's what the Ali Center, because I'm thinking like, oh, like when we remember King, hence when we kind of speak him back into current day, and we start thinking about his impact and his legacy and teaching him to the next generation so that they can live out his impact and live out his legacy. One of the things that we don't tend to think about is all of King. Like we remember King in bits and pieces, and we tend to remember him in the bits and pieces that are most comfortable for where we are as a society at a given time, right? And that's, so I think it's a great topic, and that to me is very frustrating because I've listened to people use King, his teachings, well, some of them, right, select the ones that fit his ideas to mute those who are being marginalized, right? And so something happens in a community, an improper trial verdict, someone is unjustly killed by local law enforcement or a random bystander citizen, and people protest. And then those who desire to silence them or at least mute them will then draw upon King and say, well, King would not have done it that way, right? King would have protested quietly. King would not have disrupted the community. King would not have ... King would not have done whatever it is that you're doing right now that I don't like. Right? And that's how we remember King, right? That's how we have been remembering King, within this kind of cultural or social epoch or time, whatever you want to use, right? Is we remember him in ways that fit whatever agenda it is that we have. And that's not remembering King.